Hello, everybody.
Welcome back to the Other Side Lifestyle Podcast with Jim and Aram. We have searched far and wide for this next guest, but first, we would be remiss if we did not remind you to get tickets for the Real Coaches Summit 2025 in April in Las Vegas, where you will pay for the whole seat, but you'll only sit on the edge.
It doesn't get old.
It doesn't
get old. It sounds.
It
makes me want to go to a monster truck rally tomorrow.
Absolutely. And don't forget, use code ARAM at any supplement website and see if it works. Today.
Just try it.
Just try it. They might be like, why do people keep putting this ARAM code in? Who is this guy? And then all of a sudden, he's endorsed by all the greats and not just Legion.
Yeah.
Who gives it out to everyone. Anyway. I'm going to take a one shot only at this, and then I'll roll it over to Aram, our guest, Farshad Sarrafi-Nour.
Yep, nailed it. Wow. I
gotta give you credit.
Let me tell you something. Everybody somehow fucks my name up. I'm like, it's so like simple, and somehow they like
which part do they mess up the most on?
All of
the
it.
Noir? Do they say like
no, the whole thing. Like,
how do they mess Farshad up?
I'm not kidding you. I tell this story like to anybody who's like wants to know like my history. I walked into I was in like 9th grade, and the teacher got to my name, and our running joke in our friend group was like, they're gonna butcher my name on the first day. She looked at my name and she goes, Sharfad, and I was like, the F is at the beginning, and then on top of that, because my last name is Sarrafi, it's so, and I get this, like it's so easy to just like
Safari.
Yeah, like they'll just they're like, I just like him accepted. I'm like, this is what it is. I can't get upset about this. Like, that's what it is. So it's cool.
It's so funny because like my last name's Hallinan. People say it wrong. And they're like, how do you say it? And I go, you just use all the letters. And that's exactly how I pronounced your name. I just used the letters.
Yeah.
And I put them in order.
I know.
In my mind. And then all right, well, nice. I'm impressed. That was my ego boost the day I'll stop talking for the rest of the episode. Aram, I should say Aram.
You should call me whatever the fuck you want. Just don't call me late.
Just don't call me late for dinner.
I think we should just call him Sharfad Safari.
Shartfad.
Yeah, literally.
Like a shart. There we go.
Well, he hails from a little bit south of where I hail from. He's a little south of Armenia. But we both found our way as immigrants into this beautiful country, and now we're just taking over completely.
One day at a time.
You guys are
I'm a natural-born citizen. I just want to remind our audience I'm a natural-born citizen.
Well,
I'm a citizen, too. I'm not natural-born, but I'm a citizen.
Correct.
I'm a citizen, too.
I should have been taking me out of here. I'll tell you that much. No, sir. No issues.
I think you should produce a naturalization certificate immediately, sir.
It's in the closet right here, like literally.
Honestly, honest to God, I have no fucking clue where mine is. I think my parents have it locked in a safe somewhere. But I'm fucked. Like if they ever go after the immigrants in this country, I'm screwed.
Thank God you're white looking enough, Aram.
Yeah,
I know.
You're the last person I think anybody's concerned.
Yeah, but my name alone will disqualify me. They see Aram, they're gonna basically think I'm far, and then it'll be the end of it.
Fair. Dude, it's like the people growing up. I had friends who were like Middle Eastern, and they're like, I'm just gonna change my last name so I don't run into airport issues. I'm like, yeah, your name is like Aram, like the first name
Farshad Smith.
Like, nothing got better by that bullshit.
Yeah.
Belief.
Hello, my name is Farshad Jones.
Yeah, like that didn't change anything. Like somebody's gonna have questions.
So give us, aside from your ethnic background and your ability to get fucked with at the airport, what is your background as far as like training, education, all that kind of stuff? Just curious.
So this is going to be funny. I've told this story before, but I actually went to school for accounting. And the reason I got into like fitness in general, and just honestly, it was more from the sports perspective. Like I was always so fascinated with training, and I got hurt a lot when I was in high school for basketball. And then I think finally when I had like a pretty bad knee issue, I got lucky in the PT I worked with. She was like, I'm pretty sure she was both a PT and a CSCS. And it was the first time somebody could explain the whole process to me in a way that was like you need to move correctly, and then these are the things you do to become a better athlete. So when I got to college, I was like, I want to be in business. Like I'm very much like love the process and the creation aspect of business. But I was like, man, I love training and stuff. And in 2011, this was the year before Instagram started becoming a thing. There was no like online coaching. The fitness industry wasn't as big like on the internet. So I was like, you know what? I love doing this, and maybe it's just something I do along the way, just because I love it. So I remember walking into the strength and conditioning room at my college, and it's a D1 program. And I remember watching the guy. I was like, man, you got basketball players doing like bodybuilding stuff. Like I'm real confused. Like everybody I read in like the magazines for sports stuff, like none of this is there. He's like, you're gonna learn if you pay attention to anybody who's good that this is all the same shit. It's like very basic. Learn how to move. There's nuances and advances, but like for the majority of people for a long time, there's no need for the nuance and the specificity. So he had suggested at the time, and this was before any of them were big, Andy Galpin, Lane Norton, Dr. Mike Israetel, Dr. Mike Stone, Tudor Bompa, like a lot of the names that you would know if you're from the strength and conditioning world. So I was like going to school, and I was also like teaching myself everything I could for whatever reason. Like I'm not even getting school credit for this, and I'm just learning all this stuff. And then my college roommate at the time had a lot of weight to lose, so I helped him through that process. It turned into all of my friends wanted help. And then over the next 4 years, it almost felt like I was a personal trainer going to school for accounting. It was a very, very not, didn't really make a whole lot of sense, right? Like it was just like weird. But what I would find is my friends going to school for PT and phys and all these, and kinesiology, they were always like, why are you in school for accounting, but you know more about what's going on than shit we're covering in our pro? And I was like, I just like this. I don't know. I don't feel compelled to go to school for it because in my head it was like you're not making money, and I think you guys know this too. There's a ceiling in like if you're in a private institution or sports, like there's a ceiling. There's also white gloves, and I was like, I don't want to be in an environment where you can't make a lot of money and you're kind of controlled by the environment you're in. Like I don't love that, and I know that about strength and conditioning, especially in sports. So that turned into we get out of college. Now people have money and they're like, we'll pay you because we know if we don't pay you, we won't do what we need to do. And it kind of over the years, as I was working in different corporate jobs, it was kind of one of those things that like slowly I was like, you know what, maybe now that this online thing is like, I'm seeing other people do it. It's not like a farce that there's just these online scammers. I mean, there's still those, but I started seeing more and more people doing it. And I just started getting more involved, and then over the years, like I had a previous business that partner, and we used to build a online coaching business together. But I've just been coaching for a while, and I'll do in person here and there. Like I think the only people at this point I do is if I have like a professional athlete. I don't think you can online coach that person. But a lot of it has been I've been fortunate enough to learn from some really good people and also be friends with some really great people. So I've learned a lot through experience, but I'm kind of the weirdo who like I have Cal Dietz's triphasic book just sitting on my desk right now. And it's like, there's not many people I know, even coaches who are in the field who are like that. And I'm like, I didn't go to school for any of this. I don't spend nearly the time they are at this, but I'll still nerd out on it. So it's kind of
Yeah, I think so I live in San Diego. What you'll see a lot here is you'll see a lot of people in the fitness industry, but what they are is they're affiliate code pushers, or they're just watching a bunch of influencers and they're mimicking that stuff. And when you bring up names like Cal Dietz or Mike T. Nelson or Bomp or anybody else, they don't even understand who those people are. It got to a point where I was even in a DM conversation with a girl who's in a PhD program, and she was trying to debunk a bunch of stuff that like Mike T. Nelson was talking about. I'm like, do you understand the level of audacity that you have to go after a guy like Mike T. Nelson, who has spent the last 25 years of his career basically being a human encyclopedia and being a walking version of Chat GPT that none of your textbooks in your PhD program will ever cover. And I think and I want you to speak to this because I think it's important. I think there's a massive disconnect, and we had Sam Buckner on our last episode as a hypertrophy researcher.
Yeah.
There's such a massive disconnect between academia and research versus what we're doing with real people.
Yeah.
And I want you to talk about that disconnect as you see it in real time.
So I think it's twofold. I think This is where I think a lot of people fuck this up, especially like the research people. And my dad's a scientist, so I've become even more privy to this because I find my father.
So he makes nuclear weapons.
Well, yeah, right.
That was
That's
racist. That was racist, Aram.
Hmm?
Aram, that was racist. Let's try.
Sure was.
It's okay.
Let's keep it down.
I am not opposed. You ought to hear some of the things I say around my friends. But so what I find is like, so my dad's a scientist. He's very, I mean, if you know anything about physics, you understand first principles, and I think that's a great frame to think about everything in your life. But what I find interesting with a lot of academic people is they go so deep into the minutia and the nuance. Like we were talking before the episode, it's like, oh, there's the study about 48 sets of quads will grow your quads X amount or whatever, and here at least some more muscle growth. And I think what happens is when academia looks at practitioners, like people who are truly practitioners, but they're not necessarily academics per se, they've lost the context of the simplicity of the human experience, right? Like at the end of the day, you're dealing with people. When you're in a lab, you're looking to find out basic information based on data inputs, right? But there's a human component to it that I think oftentimes is lacking with people in academia. Like I'll talk to people that I think are very smart. Some of my own friends are named people in the industry who are very evidence-based. And where I find sometimes there's a lack, it's like you're not thinking of this through the one lens you really can't in a coaching environment, which is they're human. They're not robots. If you were dealing with robots, I think a lot of the academia would come out and be like, okay, cool. Yeah. Like if this is a robot and you're inputting with a robot, it would make sense. But there's a human element to this. And then on the other side of it, I think a lot of the practitioners I meet, if they come up to a solution or they come up to an understanding, they very much boil it down as like, this is the end all be all. And so I think we go into one of two extremes. We don't create enough context, or we create the end all be all version of like what's going on. And so the answer is often kind of in the middle. And I find the people that I respect and find to have good, really healthy conversations around training, most of the people I talk to, I don't think it's that we disagree. We might have some nuances that we don't see eye to eye on. And to me, if the thing that you and I don't see eye to eye on is nuances, more cases than not, that's completely based off experience. That is not based on actual evidence or data. And I don't mean that like you don't have your evidence and I don't have mine, but it's like if you have one version of this and I have one version and I've spent my whole career this way and you've spent your whole career that way, it's hard for me to sit there and be like, well, you're probably wrong.
Right.
Like just on certain.
With that being said, what's the best way to grow your glutes, and why do you hate Brett Contreras's?
I don't hate that.
I'm just kidding.
And I think even, like I'll use him as an example. I think a lot of people see what he does, and I know he's fantastic in a lot of ways. He would probably be the first person to tell you that it's like if you're not even good at the basic movement, in general, this added volume and shit is so useless because you're not moving correctly. So like I think even if you talk to him, he'd probably agree. Like it's movement first, then it's all the other ancillary things. I find way too many times in the fitness industry that the common thing is more cardio, more lifting, and I'm like that. It sounds cool till it stops being cool.
Well, and not to mention the toll it takes on not only your physiology but your psychology, because then you start to get obsessed with the idea that I'm just not doing enough.
Yes.
And
did you see Austin Stout's post from like other today or yesterday talking about improved digestion?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like, people go on vacation, eat and drink, whatever, their digestion improves. People take a week off the gym, their digestion improves. People and all this stuff. And he's like, what's the common denominator? Stress reduction.
Yeah.
But everybody's trying to do all these things. What's the best? You could say all the stuff you said that somebody's going to, so then what is the best? It's like, I just said there is no best. Everybody's different. There's nuance, all this. People are like, oh, it's interesting. What's the best? But we see that, anyway.
How do you help? I mean, I know that you work with Gen Pop as well, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
So when you're working with Gen Pop, and obviously with Gen Pop folks, it tends to be that magic bullet theory. Like, I'm missing this one thing, that's why I'm still fat, or I'm missing this one thing, and that's why I can't grow this muscle group. How are you able to break things down for them to empower them to understand that it isn't just one thing, and it's not your fault that you think that, but we need to be able to rewire your mindset to think that it involves all of these different variables?
So I actually do something. I do this with athletes. I do this with bodybuilders and powerlifters, and I do this with Gen Pop. I run everyone through some iteration of triphasic. And the reason I do that is because as soon as you make someone realize that their movement quality sucks, they quickly find out that they have other things that they haven't dealt with that are actually influencing the goals that they have. And the second thing that I place a big emphasis on top of that when I start with someone is I tell them you have to think of it through the lens, like even if they're a fat loss client, I was like, if you spent more of your time focused on how can I perform better rather than how can I lose fat, the continuum towards getting the body or the outcome that you want is just so much easier because you no longer look at it as like this food's bad, that food's bad. You might look at it as like, hey, if I want to eat something like this, I can. It's easier to do it in this context than that. That's it. It stops being the mental gymnastics of like, oh, I got to eat clean all week, and then if I eat a slice of pizza, like I'm going to be fat. Like I find with a lot of people when you like reverse engineer the paradigm around how they approach their goal, whether gen pop or athlete, it completely changes the speed to which they can create the outcome because then the fixation stops being around I have a shitty relationship with food, I can't get this fat off my stomach. It just becomes, hey, what is the process and what are the inputs that drive training to improve? If training improves, as long as we are not over aggressive with how much we eat, there's a high likelihood we're going to change our body composition and we're going to look the way we want to look. And that's like with so many people, I've seen them come to me with the perspective of the last coach said calorie deficit. I was like, I'm not arguing calorie deficit. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that based on basic physiology, you don't need a calorie deficit to lose fat. All I'm going to tell you is you're probably going to like it a lot better if you focus on actually developing tissue and being consistent in habits that drive your performance, rather than being like, am I in a calorie deficit and being fixated on what I can and cannot eat.
Yeah, that's the hard part. I think is also unwiring 20 years
Yeah.
of programming and just the bullshit that people have heard. And especially now, everybody's got a fucking microphone, everybody's got a stage, everybody's got a million and one opinions. Nobody agrees with anybody anymore. And it's all basically just, can I get more eyeballs on me and take eyeballs off of you so that I can finally sell the thing I need to sell and make my money? Fuck you, and I'm going to tear the industry down with me. And I think if we spent more time as professionals all collaborating and having productive discourse, and I mean truly productive, like something happened today where a friend of mine who's in the hormone related field who spoke at my friend's con. Do you know who Allie Gilbert is?
Name's familiar.
She's like the male hormone chick, the short blonde hair. So
she's the self-proclaimed, but not self-proclaimed boner queen.
She's the boner queen.
That's her.
So,
boner queen. She helps men.
She held a conference called Silverback in November, and one of her speakers was this girl named Jess, and she was talking about insulin resistance and stuff like that. And this registered dietitian, who has a habit of doing this with a lot of people, was basically just calling her a shitfluencer and saying she doesn't know what she's talking about, blah, blah, blah. She's done it to me. She's done it to a handful of other people. And it's always leaves a comment. Then the person responds in an educational type of way or in a way to understand the other perspective. And then there's no response from her. So she clearly is doing it just to stir the pot and just to enhance her own level of engagement. Now, this is a registered dietitian. I think she's still in school, so she's not quite done with her program yet. But what scares me about people like that is that they're just masquerading and running around the internet and just causing trouble. And what they're doing is they're negatively impacting the industry because somebody's going to go through that comment thread, read her one comment, and then because it stands out as the contrarian view, well, now the person's even more confused before they even started. Yeah. So that's the thing I think we're fighting the most is the fact that our audience, whether it's our clients, whether it's people that are viewing our content, they just don't fucking know anymore what is the right way. And so how do you tell people, listen, the right way for me might not be the right way for you?
Yeah, so whenever I talk to someone, even if it's someone's reaching out like, hey, I want a second opinion, because I'll do consults with friends and other coaches. Like even a friend of mine called me last night. He's like, hey, this is what my coach and I want to do. What do you think? My biggest thing is always like, can you create context and then look at it through the lens of it depends, right? I think training is like the easiest place to look at this, but this is true with diet, this is true with stress management. There's no yes or no matter what you do. Like there's very few things in even training, as someone who's very training focused, that I'm like, that's an absolute no. Like, fuck, don't do that at all. I think one of the things I tell people is if the answer is through the lens of absolutism and that person that you're asking for insight on doesn't help you create context as to what's happening for you, they're probably not going to be able to steer you in the right direction. And it's not because their answer might not be correct. The person might say, hey, you need to be in a calorie deficit to lose fat. And fundamentally, that is true. There might just be other aspects of the puzzle happening in your situation that are causing you maybe not to see the scale change, maybe not to see fat loss occur. And until you can learn to create context and look at it from a 40,000 foot view, it's very hard for me to believe that it's like a one size fits all. So like there are certain things that are fundamentally true, and I was like, it's great that someone can tell you, hey, if you progressively overload, you'll probably get stronger. Okay, we agree on that. If you're in a calorie deficit, that is what is required to create fat loss, and even from a scale standpoint, what is lost in translation with a lot of people is those things are true fundamentally, and there are other avenues and other aspects that directly influence how that works. And like you were talking about before with stress, it's like if I'm hyper stressed, I'm by nature not going to see that, especially with women, you might not even see the scale go down. You might see the scale go up just because of the way they are hormonally. That does not mean you're not making progress. But if your fixation is based off of the scale going down is how you measure fat loss, and it's the only thing you're focused on to get leaner, then yeah, you're gonna be in a rock and a hard place because you're like, well, I'm in a deficit and I'm not losing fat, and it's like, okay, you didn't consider these other constraints. So I think for people that I've talked to, it's create as much context as you can, and then once you have the context, you need to be consistent with the behaviors for an extended period of time before you're willing to say, okay, this might not be working. And it's not that it's not working because the system itself has a problem. There may just be another issue that will come to light. Like I've seen people who they won't lose fat for 4 to 6 weeks, and I'm like, that also makes sense because you've been stressed. So you don't handle your personal stress well. Training is its own inflammatory process. So we're putting two stressors on the system. And then ironically enough, on week 7, you lose 5 pounds that could have been lost over those 6 weeks previous, but we just de-stressed you across the board. And that was what made the progress. So I think it's helping people understand how to create context. But I also understand the standpoint of the human brain is designed to be efficient and conserve energy. So we just want like black and white as much as we can. And that's like a survival mechanism, right? So I think it's being able to learn how to create context.
Yeah, well, it's like I'm on with what you're saying. I don't even have a question.
I think context is the problem with context is that it requires time and effort, and it also requires the other person who's receiving that message to give a shit.
Yes.
And it's not always easy to convince, especially Gen Pop, who's been so frustrated with the lack of results and have tried everything. And we use quotations because we know that that's not true 99% of the time. Because they've never actually stuck to the basics for long enough to see them materialize. So their disbelief is that, well, these principles of physiology that you keep saying are actually true or not true. They don't actually work for me. I'm the outlier.
You're
When
a
in
unicorn.
right, like
You're a unicorn. Yeah.
it's my genetics that prevent me from the law of thermodynamics to be real. So a calorie deficit doesn't work for me. And it's like, no, it is working for you. It's just not working for you at the rate that you would like it for you to work for you. And managing that expectation, I think that's why any good coach is probably almost more focused on the psychology of the individual than they are on the physio. Because the physiology is not hard. I mean, dude, you just broke it down in fucking 13 seconds, and all of us who have a brain can do that. But the problem is how do we manage the human psychology while we're going through this very lengthy fucking lifelong process that we're on of just generally having better behavior overall. And then as you start to build these skill sets, then you can layer in some nuance to make it work for you to see these different outcomes. But don't talk to me about, well, this doesn't work. Yeah, because you haven't done anything for fucking 6 months straight, at least, to even assess whether or not what you've deployed makes any sense.
Yeah.
Do you see, I mean, obviously, like you have a lot of opinions like I do. What are some of the things that you're seeing, hearing in the industry that drive you fucking crazy?
Fuck. Oh my god. I have two perspectives on this that have come more to light the last 5 years. Especially, I think you and I talked about. There's a lot of people who are influencers who want to be coaches, and I don't think they're bad coaches. Like I think a lot of these people mean well. I don't think their intent is to hurt. I think they have a misnomer on what real coaching is. Also the other thing is like most of these people have never done a single in-person session in their life, so therefore they don't know. Like you're dealing with fucking people. Like it's a human business. It's a human to human business, anyways. I think for a lot of people, what I hear that I just hate, they're like, oh, it's about going harder. And I hate that like more than anything. And the reason I say I hate that is because like it's not a matter of hard. Like do I think a bodybuilding prep gets difficult at some point? Yeah, I'm not here to tell you it doesn't. Do I think getting under a bar and loading a bunch of weight to get stronger it doesn't it gets difficult. But we have the psychological constraint of what we attach to hard, and I think that's where people struggle is if you keep re-cementing something psychologically that is actually a limitation to their psychology, you will find people will at some point experience what they call burnout. So I've noticed a lot of times in bodybuilding, especially, you'll see people be like, "Yeah, I got to go hard. I got to go hard." And then when you talk to them, they're like, "Yeah, I just got to push through how hard this is." And I'm like, and then you listen to other aspects of their life, and all they can tell you is it's hard. It's this. Like they're annoyed, and I'm like, cool. So every aspect of your life right now, if it's relationship at home, it's hard. If it's work, it's hard. If it's going to the gym, it's hard. Everything is overloaded into one direction, which is hardness to you, right? Life has this funny way of bringing us back to center. At some point, you're going to have to soften in one aspect or another. And then you see the pendulum swing. But then when that happens, because they've been so fixated on this psychological constraint of it has to be hard, they have like this identity crisis. I've seen this with more competitors that I know. It's also why they binge, by the way. Like, and this is the part people miss. And so if that's what's happening is we're so fixated on this misnomer of it's got to be hard, be like work hard, all this kind of shit, you lose sight of the ability to create a consistent process that works time and time again. And therefore, what you see in our industry is like when you look at dieting statistics being the easiest, it's like 95% of people after 3 years are as fat, or if not fatter than they were when they started. Why is that? You create too many constraints inside of a system that doesn't actually support them on a multifaceted level, not just physiologically, but psychologically as well. And so when I see people talk about, oh, you just got to go harder and push hard and all that stuff, I don't think that it's incorrect to believe that some people, just need to do the work. I think creating context around what that looks like rather than just blanket statementing what I think bodybuilding does, especially where it's like, you just got to work hard. I think that's got to change.
And that goes to what you were saying earlier when you're stuck in that, I got to go hard, got to go hard. That's the same as I got to do more, I got to do more.
There you go.
What you're saying before. It's like we're all doing too much.
It's very arbitrary, right? It's like, what does more look like?
It's like I could have done more to make it harder versus I did enough. I did what I was supposed to do.
Yeah. And it's a never ending thing. And I one of the things I learned, I have a friend of mine, Alan Bishop. He's the performance director at the University of Houston, and him and I will talk. And he's like, I'd always prefer an athlete fall a rep shy or a set short than to just keep going and overdo it. And that's not to say don't work, but there is a long-term risk and compounding effect of constantly being in this state of I got to go harder, I got to do more. I got to go harder, I got to do more. It's not saying designed correctly in context that's not good, but from a psychological standpoint, 99 times out of 100, that leads someone down a very terrible path, like in a lot of ways. And then when the psychology is like that, what you then find is, okay, you're thinking like that, you're higher at risk of injury, like by nature. I don't know the people I find to be the healthiest with their training and being able to be the least injured, they have a pretty good awareness and understanding of how to approach what they're doing. They know when to push, they know when to pull back, they know how to chill, they also know how to get locked in. That's any great athlete. I find a lot of people are not good at that at all.
And you touched on before about movement. Mm-hmm. About the movement pattern, about moving better, how this is, going to be something that people need to focus on. What does the average person do who's like, am I moving right? How do I know if I'm moving well?
Well, I think a couple of things. I don't think it hurts to go learn from like a personal trainer if you can find someone decent, or just like watch videos. There are good resources out there, and we could probably list a good amount. I think one of the things that comes to my mind is like when you do a push-up, when you do a squat, there's a multitude of muscle groups that are working in those movements. It might be more focused on something, like a push-up is potentially more of a chest movement, depending on how you do it. But when you do it, do you feel the muscles in the journey working the way they do? When you first start, you don't. Like that's just most people don't wake up and they have a mind-muscle connection. Can you learn just the baseline technique and then over time develop the mind-muscle connection? And I like saying it this way rather than that. the body awareness for what is happening. I don't think it's like you have to have this mind muscle connection, but I don't disagree with it. Once you have body awareness, like you do a squat, you can feel your quads, you can feel your glutes. If you do like a stiff-legged deadlift, you can feel your hamstrings and your glutes. Once you have that body awareness, after that is when you can start to learn to make the decision on, okay, do I need more sets? Do I need more reps? Do I need more volume to grow? Or do I need to design this differently? But if you don't have true body awareness when you are training, you can probably for a long time run a very basic 3x6, 4x8, 6x2, like any basic training program without a whole lot of periodization and be just fine. And I say that to say, for that reason, you probably can do less, but right off the rip, like you just don't need more. And secondarily, if your problem often, especially as you develop more training competency, if you constantly run to, I need more volume or more sets or reps or whatever, a lot of times you're going to find, and I've tested this way too many times to feel differently about it, it's often you lost body awareness. You don't move as well as you could. And like, yeah, it's cool that you can do a hack squat and you can force it to be only your quads. But if that's the only thing you focus on for so long, it might be at the detriment of your glutes. And if you know anything about human movement, if you have poor hip extension, that translates into a lot of problems in a lot of different aspects of your life. And so if you lose that, what did you really do for yourself?
What would you say to the woman who's working hard, she's increasing volume, she's focusing on recovery, she's trying to grow her glutes? What do you think is the missing thing for that person? What should they be doing?
9 out of 10 women that I've had that conversation with do not know how to go into proper hip extension, whether they're in a hinge or a squat. Try and true. I have a woman, when she came to me, thought I need more direct work with my glutes. So I was like, we're not going to do that. We're going to do something totally different. So what I had her do is I would have her air bike. We would do sprints for like 20 minutes. It would be like 7 to 8 second sprints, 2 minutes off, 7 to 8 second sprints, 2 minutes off. We'd pull her off the air bike. Now she's over time, and obviously 20 minutes is not a lot, but she's like a little bit more fatigued. So when I go to tell her to do something like a 5-second eccentric on a squat or a hinge, what she was finding is she started compensating in her movements. And I'm like, these compensations exist when you're not fatigued. You just don't notice them because you're not fatigued yet. So by nature, you're overcompensating in your movement. So what I had her do, and I learned this from Cal Dietz, is on the way down on the eccentric, whether you're doing a squat or a hinge movement or a split squat variation, have the big toe rise. When you get to the bottom and you go to reverse, squeeze the big toe into the floor. She started doing that, and she was like, my glutes are on fire. I'm like, you've done 2 sets of 5, and your glutes are more engaged on 2 sets of 5, moving the big toe up and down, than this, 8 movement, 30 set workout that you've been doing for years. And in 12 weeks, if you looked at her before and after with glutes, most of my friends are like, oh, she must be doing like 16, 20 sets of glutes. I'm like, she might do 12 sets in a week, if that, like all in. But she didn't realize that she'd been compensating for so long. But if you're so used to your body moving a certain way, a lot of times we don't even see it. We're just like, yeah, like I'm squatting correctly. I'm like, do you feel your glutes? Well, no. I'm like, oh, then that's a problem. If you don't feel your glutes when you're squatting, I know that sounds counterintuitive. That's probably not a good thing. So just driving up volume, sure, it might help, but that wouldn't be the first lever I pull. And so a lot of times I think it's figuring out, why aren't you feeling a muscle group, or why is it not being recruited? There's often other issues in the change.
But moving correctly is only for advanced people. I mean, regular people, that's too much. No. They don't have time to learn how to move correctly.
No. All of this nonsense about advanced, like I use weight releasers when I train, so I'll do like overloaded eccentric work. I was like, the only reason I'm doing that at this point in my life is I've exhausted most of the things that I have access to, right? And even then, I'm still very focused on big toe up, big toe down, like push your hips back. None of the cues change. It's just an added nuance, very small nuance that has some benefits, but like it doesn't really change the emphasis of what you on.
Yeah, and most of the time it's like those changes that, maybe you're making in a program over time, or it's just to keep things exciting. And that's the psychology, that's the psychological part of training. It's like, you're not going to do the same thing forever. It's like, let me try this new thing. Oh, so that new thing, is that the thing that, no, I did the thing just to change it up a little bit, keep something interesting.
Well, that's so I have the Train Heroic app going, and what I did for this new block of training was I didn't
How
change
much is
much.
that? How much is that a month?
$29, less than $1 a day. You can access my
Wow.
training.
And
Yeah,
then where would somebody? Because this is the first time I'm hearing about this app. Where would somebody go to
you can
find
just
to be
you
able?
can just DM me on Instagram, and I'll send
Okay.
you a link. Yeah,
If I downloaded Train Heroic, could I search your name or anything?
you could. I believe
Oh,
so. You
okay.
could, and you'd be able to find me and access me that way. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
And the program, you change the program for them, or is
Once every 8 weeks.
oh wow,
Yeah.
that seems really convenient for somebody who feels a little lost but doesn't have the money to pay for a one-on-one online trainer or in person. Are there videos to show proper movement?
There's demonstration videos and
That's awesome.
explanations. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff.
That's awesome.
Thank you for being my marketing manager.
Yeah, that commercial, that live commercial was paid for you by me and my time.
Trader James Hallinan LLC.
Yes.
Well, they say
Liveplugs.com is my website. I just, you bring me on as a guest on your show,
But
and
if
I
you
just
have
keep
anything
being
you want to,
impressed by you, the host, and talk about your options for coaching.
yeah, if you
Yeah.
want to, if you want to ever have a guy just walking around advertising your stuff for you, he'll just stand right behind you and just plug
I
everything
Yeah.
you
love
need.
that.
Yeah.
The only thing I really changed in my 8 week block was I went from having actual rep prescriptions to I just said do as many as you can in 60 seconds.
Yeah.
And the psychological change that occurred on everybody almost across the board was like, oh my God, this is so much harder. And I'm like, it's not any harder because you're probably doing about the same amount of reps I would have had you do before. But now the rep constraint is gone
Yep.
and you're just exhibiting effort without any expectation. And I think that's the thing, dude. Like, I've always found that, like, when I was glued to a program, it never worked as well as it did when I started to become a little bit more free flowing with it.
Mhm.
And I knew that I had a set of work to do that was like, okay, you have like a menu
Yeah.
that you're looking at, and that's what the program is. But then you get to kind of swap things out. Like, maybe I don't want this as an appetizer today. I'm going to choose this
Yeah.
instead. It's my favorite place. I know it's going to be
Yeah.
good. And that's how training to me should be. But the problem, I think, what we see that with, at least with Gen Pop people, is that generally speaking, they're going to be a little bit less active outside of the gym. So things like
Yep.
warming up are super essential because they're just coming out cold off a desk or in a hip flex position for 8, 9 hours. And then they're just rushing to get this workout done. And it has to be like, I have to tick every box on this workout or else it's not going to be effective.
Yep.
And what I've started doing now is I've just started telling people, like, I don't give a shit if you get 40% of it done. I would
Yeah.
rather see you do quality for 7 sets total as opposed to doing 20 sets on 6 different movements and then just getting through it.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's like you're
And
out of time. Either take a set off of each movement or pick half the movements and do them to completion.
yep.
100%.
And psychologically, even for me, who's had 25 years of lifting experience, backing off and having that type of a style of training has wildly benefited my mental health because I'm just not concerned about it anymore. Like, I have so much more peace when it comes to the process. I'm not overthinking it. I don't give a shit what happens in the gym anymore. If like I go in and I have a great workout, cool. If it sucks, cool. Whatever. Like, it's not going to change the course of my day.
Yeah.
Whereas I think our clients are so worried about like, well, if it doesn't get done the way it's supposed to get done, what's the point?
Yeah, no, and I look. I think the best way to frame it with a client is like, did you get good at the movement? Awesome. That's the first premise. Until that's like a consistent conversation, I don't care that much about the sets and the reps and all that shit. Like, I really don't. I'd rather you learn to be consistent. The thing after that I find with clients, and lifestyle people are very interesting. I've noticed a very funny arc probably the last 10 years on this. If you give them more flexibility on movement choices, like at first, you find after like a year or two, they actually want less movement variation. Like, they'd rather do push-ups and bench press and like the basics for longer periods of time. And I think part of the reason that works is because rather than focusing on creating multiple constraints, you start with one. It's the same thing with dieting, right? It's like, if I give you 1,500 constraints as to how to get your goal, there's no likelihood you build a sustainable process to keep weight off or look the way you want to look. If I just start with one at a time and then create the nuance after, it's a lot easier. And I also think, and I love that you said like, hey, the only change we made was like, hey, instead of X amount of reps, you train for time. I find there's just so many ways to manipulate rest intervals and training intervals. Like, even the average person that I talk to, they're like, "Oh, you must have like this elaborate program," and I'll show them my program. They're like, "What are you? Why?" And I'm like, "You don't need to." And it's not that there isn't benefit to more complexity in certain contexts, but even then, it's like unless I was trying to peak for powerlifting or strongman or something, I don't really need that level of detail, let alone that level of nuance to get there. I might play with it, but you can do a lot of basic stuff, and as long as you're moving in the different ways that the body can, you're going to get you're going to get probably 95% of the results. And don't get me wrong, I definitely do nerd out over like the 5%, like how do you periodize it? Which movements are better paired with what? Should I do this versus should I definitely enjoy doing that, but I'm not naive enough to believe that like that's the big thing. You do everything else right, we can have fun in that sandbox all day long, but until we learn to move well and learn how to push ourselves, it really doesn't matter as much as you think it does.
Yeah, I mean, how often is research and inexperience, like untrained Gen Pop, when it comes to all the things that people start pulling up in research? Well, it actually shows that. Well, yeah, that's not friggin' a normal human.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a
100%.
22-year-old female college soccer player
Yeah,
postseason
yeah,
during her luteal phase. It's like, Jesus Christ.
yeah, and I think for most people, once you talk to me after you have 5 years of solid basics, and like I think you can accomplish it in 2. 5 seems to be the safe place for me. I find if I have someone who's just done basic stuff for 5 years, adding a nuance here, adding a nuance there, giving them certain changes technically, that's when it starts to make a difference. But for the person who just started or is still early, it's like you're still so new to this. Your first, there's not, especially not, there's nothing like the first 2 years of training, even the first 5. Like, man, the things I look into and play with to make the kind of progress I do now is nothing like it was when I was 13, 14 years old. But also, like, that's what I nerd out on. I still make great progress. And so, but I'm not naive enough to believe that, like, I needed this level of detail at 14. I just didn't. I was young and I could sneeze in the weight room and I was going to grow. Now it's like you got to make sure you time certain shit. Like it's just I'm
Like
not
when you
I'm
take
not like
trend.
yeah, or you take trend and like I don't do that at this point. So it's like I'm still not on anything. We have to be very tactful to make this work. You just do at some point.
Well, I think that natural runway that people think they have is so much shorter, but they don't
Yeah.
appreciate it. I would pay $1 million to be able to get back to 15 years old and start over again with what I know now. I mean, it's unbelievable what I achieved by accident, and it's unbelievable what I've had to do in the last 5 years to squeeze out a tiny drop of results.
Yeah.
And without drugs, it wasn't happening most of the time for
Yeah.
me. And what I think people really are short sighted on, especially Gen Poppers, is that they're so focused on this very quick result that they see, all over online with all these before and after pictures and with all the promises they get that they can just get thrown around on the internet.
Yeah.
What they don't appreciate is like you should keep lifting probably for the rest of your fucking life.
100%.
And you should be eating well, not because of a aesthetic outcome, but because it makes everything in your life feel better.
Yes.
So unless you plan on stopping either one of those things, why the fuck does the timeline even matter for you?
Well, and at a certain point, you're working somewhat hard if you're not, if you don't have a background in working hard to not get worse.
Right.
Like I want all these. You're 48 years old, Helen. Like I'm 46. I'm not expecting gains. I got to work just to maintain and just like be feeling good 20, 30 years from now.
Yeah.
So it's like let go of some of these ideas about improving in this aesthetic way, especially at a certain point in your life, and understand if you weren't doing this, you would be getting worse year in, year out. I struggle to say that for some reason. Versus, how come I'm not losing a bunch of weight? Have you gotten fatter? No, I'm just staying the same. Good. You would have been fatter. You would have been weaker. You would have been in more pain. You'd start shitting your pants because of the way you're eating. You'd be wearing diapers. Like there's 1,000 things that I think we just don't realize how it could be if they weren't putting in the work that they're putting in versus wanting all these results that they're expecting.
Yeah.
It's transformational results.
Even with older people that I've worked with, like I've seen people over the age of 45, 50 hit some insane numbers in the weight room. But I think one of the things you realize too is like, I don't think you're ever too old. I think part of it is you have to be able to manage your expectation. Especially privy to and understanding what is the baseline I'm standing on, right? Like I'm someone who, with almost 20 years of lifting experience at this point, I understand I could probably do what I need to in 6 to 8 weeks to go do a powerlifting meet. I may not be the strongest person, but
how many times a week could you go out to eat and drink and still get that progress? Because that's what our listeners want to know.
But as someone who's done it for 20 years, like, and I mean, with how much I have going on with the business, it's like there's a lot. There's times where there's a lot of dinners and we're traveling, and I'm like, my friends are like, will look at me and be like, what the fuck is this? Like, you eat out and look. I'm like, yeah. I also have my systems in place. I have my sleep dialed. There's a lot of things you don't see. So maybe you see me post, hey, we went to this steakhouse. You don't see all my other meals. You don't see the way I operate my day-to-day. You don't see how dialed in I am. And the fact that this probably, even if I have one off day with my diet, it's so marginal at how it influences me, relatively speaking, that you, on the other hand, have been doing this not the way that's necessary to prime your body. So yeah, you have one bad day and all of a sudden you feel like shit, right? Like, now granted.
And then you let that feeling determine all your decisions the next day versus if you felt like shit the next day, you're like, oh God, I feel like shit. You're back on it. So even that's different.
It's being able to create context. Like, it's like anything else. If you're good at business, it takes you way less time to launch the next thing that you do than when you first started and you're still learning. Right? Same thing in relationships. Someone who's been in a healthy marriage for 20 plus years, they're much more in tune with their partner and what they need, rather than when they were 15 and they're like, oh, I think I know how to do this. Like, no, you don't. Like, you don't have the reps and you don't have the experience. Now, if you want to, regardless of aspect of life, I think you can condense the learning curve. I just find a lot of people are more fixated, like you said, on the outcome. And so if you're not learning to immerse yourself in the process, and I know they're like, oh, well, the only thing that matters is if you win or the outcome. I'm not here to argue with that. But my thing is do you want to win once or do you want to win forever? And those are two very different perspectives. How you approach what you're doing is going to be totally different if you're looking for long-term winning rather than, hey, we just won this one time. Like it's like the keyboard warriors who are like, yeah, I won that junior college intramural championship. It's like, that's cool.
It's not really. I think it is.
Yeah, but it's like it didn't amount to what you were looking for long term. So like,
yeah, I mean, Al Bundy won state. He's a shoe salesman. So but I think with all that stuff that you're saying, I mean, it all goes back, and Aram, you touched on it as well. It's acceptance of where you are and just awareness. I think too many people just aren't self-aware enough to realize they're putting in so much work in these areas, but then how 50% of their week is garbage. And they're just not aware. They're just remembering the good things they did, and they're frustrated, and they don't accept where they are.
And the other thing too is like, if you're at 50%, I think the problem for most people is they try to go from 50% to 95% the next week. Yeah. I'm like, that sounds cool until you realize you don't have the behaviors in place to map towards that. Now you can create a snowball effect fast. Personally, have seen it with people. I've seen people who go from 50 to 95% quick. But their journey to that is not, I'm trying to do it overnight. It's, how do I make this the simplest system for me? I think that's.
And then quick is only quick in retrospect. Quick is never quick in the moment.
100%. Yeah. And it's also the other thing too, and I say this to a lot of people, how willing you are to make the process simple is actually the thing that will drive quick and fast. Yeah, because most people are like, oh my God, like if I'm going to lose all my fat, I have to be in a deficit, but then I have to make sure I only eat foods that are like less than X amount of calories per minute. Like, it's the most convoluted thing. I'm like, dude, just look for the simplest way. The simplest answer is often always the right answer for you. But people don't want to hear that. They're like, well, no, I saw in the keto book or online this influencer. I'm like, that's cool. You find out how their psychological situation is. I can promise you it's a fucking nightmare. So
I had a client text me today, and she said, do you have any advice as I head into the weekend? And I said, I have a couple of questions for you if you don't mind me asking first. She's a little on the newer side. And I said, what are your problems normally on the weekends? And she said, well, I don't track my food. I said, are you prepared the way you are Monday through Friday? She said, no. So right there, you have two opportunities that you didn't even look at. One is that you lose any ounce of quantification on the weekend, so it becomes a free for all. And two, you don't have a system that's the same system that you have Monday through Friday, and you think that that system doesn't need to persist Saturday and Sunday. So if you just address those two areas, you won't have to ask me what my ideas are for you for Saturday and Sunday. You'll create your own ideas for Saturday and Sunday. And she's like, I didn't think about that perspective. I said, great, that's my job.
That's what you're here for.
That's it. We didn't have to sit there and problem solve anything or give her a fucking menu or tell her what to eat at the restaurant. It's more along like Saturday and Sunday is an extension of the weekend. I don't think of Saturday to be a special day. It's no different than Wednesday for me. It just means that if I had fucking crumble cookies last night. I had Chipotle 3 nights ago. I'm not going to, my behavior is going to be whatever I want it to be whenever I want it to be that way.
Yeah.
Because like you said before, you don't see the other 4 meals a day, every day. You don't see the fact that I'm going to sleep at 8:30 at night while you're still up at fucking 11 watching Netflix for the 95th time. Yeah. And then you're wondering why you don't feel good on fucking Friday morning when your kids are awake before you and you're running around to pack their food. You forget to pack yourself anything. You don't eat anything till 3. And then Friday night becomes a binge fest because you're hungry. Like none of this stuff, if you actually break it down, is difficult at all to realize. It's just a matter of sitting down to say, where am I falling apart and why am I falling apart?
Even that, like you didn't even have to say as much as you did to that client. It's like, what's the problem with the week? It's this. What's the week? What do you think would be a good strategy to make the weekend? I guess maybe meal prep and not go out to eat. Sounds like you knew the answer all along.
You always have the answer. That's what I love. Is like if you get curious
for everything in life,
you will always have the answer.
Yeah, we're just looking for that permission or that confirmation from somebody else because I think we're just in the habit of doubting ourselves. And it's what you were saying before about that self-talk, and Araz would talk more about it, and I talk about it, the hard, and then like you said, that bleeds into every area of life.
Yeah,
I can't believe you're wearing a Eagles shirt,
dude. Thank you for pointing that out. It is 2 days before the Super Bowl. I am from right outside of Philadelphia. The only reason I have any sports clothes is because my father will get me one every now and then for for Christmas or something. So I found this in my closet.
So instead of our normal exit,
I don't wear this stuff in public. I'm a public school teacher on top of coaching. So I wore this to school today. If this was not a school day, getting the kids excited for the Eagles, I wouldn't wear this in public.
Where are you located? I'm curious.
I'm right outside of Philadelphia in Jersey.
Okay, cool.
So like I'm 15, 20 minutes to the bridge. 20, 25 minutes to the stadiums and all that. But yeah, so I mean, like I own some Phillies clothes and Eagles stuff, but I don't watch it. I know 2 names on the Eagles, and I'd recognize more.
Who?
I'm a huge fan.
What 2 names on the Eagles do you know?
Is it Jalen Hurts and
Saquon
Barkley?
Okay.
If you threw some names out there, I'd recognize them.
That's pretty good.
I don't know. I got no names. I don't know. I don't even know if I'm going to watch on Sunday, to be honest.
If I didn't have a kid, I would not. We have a 2-hour delay the next day, so there's not even an excuse to be like, dude, we're not staying up for this. I just could care less.
Yeah, the game will be done by 6 for the game because I'm on the West Coast, so it's.
I know, I can't wait.
Like the game ends and you're like, cool, I still have my whole evening.
I know, it's ridiculous. It sucks. This stuff starts so late. It's ridiculous. Philadelphia will burn itself to the ground, win or lose. Now, the last 2 years, Chiefs were underdogs. This year, they're not. So does that mean maybe the NFL will let them lose, or are they going to make them win again?
I don't know. We're going to find out.
Roughing the passer. Roughing the passer.
The whole fucking time. I can't
Roughing the passer.
Are you part of the light pole lubrication team so people don't climb up the poles?
Did you know about this, Far?
No.
In Philadelphia, the city has to lube up all the poles in the city so that people don't climb up them, because they would climb up, hang over the street light, and like people are falling and dying. They literally lube them up. with the Rom's ejaculate.
I would peg that to be something that happens in Vegas where I live, but like
Not
there's none of
Phillies.
that here. This place is a lot. At times, like living here, I'm like, this place is a lot more tame than you would think. Like not on the strip per se,
Yeah.
especially because that's like what people come for. But man, living here, I'm like, this is one of the calmest places I think I've ever
Yeah.
been. Like, and I've lived in different parts of the country. I've been in New York most of my life, and then also on and off in Los Angeles. But like, this is such a calm place relative to most of the other major cities.
You like hiking over at Red Rocks
Yeah.
Canyon or whatever. That's pretty close, right? Like half a mile away.
Yeah, it's probably it's like a 5-minute drive. Like I can see it right out my window.
All right, you
Are you like
you can give us a tour in April.
What part of Vegas are you in?
So I'm like, you would drive off of the 215. You would start driving towards Summerlin. It's not even 4 minutes. Like I'm the midpoint between Summerlin and the Strip, but like going through the 215. If you know where the UFCPI and Apex are, that I can see it out the other window in the house. So like if I go to the front, the window in the front of the house, I can see Apex. If I look out this window, I can see Red Rocks.
Is that by Henderson?
No, Henderson's the opposite. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll meet you at Meow Wolf on a Saturday night after a Saturday afternoon hike at Red Rocks. We'll hit up a Mega Mart.
Sounds good to me.
Dude, Aram.
What?
And I'll let you know we're hanging up. Disco Biscuits. They just played at a Meow Wolf in New Mexico.
What, the store?
The store. And it was awesome because everything's lit up, like the whole place. So it looked really cool. It's a band I like. Far you, if you care about your life and anything, you would start listening to them. They're crushing it. But yeah, they played it at Meow Wolf. It was pretty cool.
Interesting.
Yeah, anyway.
Well, don't worry. I'm gonna take mushrooms tomorrow for my birthday. So
tomorrow's your birthday?
Yeah.
Oh God.
No, you're February 8th. Look at you.
Yeah, I'm gonna take
41. Check if that's in my phone. It is.
I'm gonna take. Do I? You're the 15th. Yeah. So do I take? So I'm going to be 41. Do I take 41 grams of mushrooms, or I take 0.4?
No, not 0.4.
No,
you go on the lunch. What do you go on the brunch? You take 4.1 grams.
No, you take 41 pounds. I can't even believe you tried to.
No. Listen,
that's so low of you. Come on, now.
Aram, 4.1 is plenty for Aram.
No, man.
It's plenty for Aram. No. 4.1 will be fine for you.
I'll cut it in half and I'll do 2 and see what happens.
What? Are you going to brunch with your family? 4.1 minimum.
I'm going to try 2, and then you could always take more. You can't take less.
It doesn't work.
I mean, it's your birthday. That would be the one time I would suggest to just start with more.
And it's a Saturday?
What's the worst thing?
Yeah. What's the worst thing? Yeah, exactly. I don't know. It's perfect.
I fucking have an awful trip and I end up in the fucking ER with a psychosis.
Well, you will if you have fear around it.
Oh, wow.
You've been in a very good mental health space lately.
True.
Things have been very good for you. You're doing a lot of self-reflection. I think that you can handle an adult beverage that grows out of the earth.
An adult dose of mushrooms.
Yeah. Just make a nice cup of tea, put a little honey in there. All right, and then we'll get on here about an hour after you drink it, and we'll all talk and see how you're feeling. Come back for part 2. Aram's birthday. Actually, we will do that tomorrow. Aram's birthday.
That'd be amazing.
All right,
dude,
I'll get a babysitter.
If I took 4 grams of mushrooms tomorrow, the last time I took 2, I had to fucking blow 3 lines of coke.
That's because you were at like a party, dude. You just be alone with yourself.
Do you understand how hard that is for me?
It's a journey of self-discovery, Aram. Okay, you don't do that stuff out of parties around people.
Well, I was trying to experiment in the wrong setting, and
Far's like, why am I here right now? He needs support, Far. Go
ahead. We all need help. All right.
Ask him our last question so he can go on with his day and go get a second training session in.
Yeah, I apologize. Far, we ask every guest on our show the same question so we can compare and judge you to all other former guests. So we're about 160 people ahead of you.
Cool.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, see ya.